Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Please subscribe and keep watching more details. Chicago Fire Season 13 immediately explained why Archer's big meltdown felt emotionally empty. Chicago Fire Season 13, Episode 17, A Beast Like This, quickly explains why Archer's Steven Weber meltdown in Chicago Med Season 10, Episode 17, Book of Archer falls flat. Book of Archer follows the crusty physician through his workday, which begins minutes after learning his ex-wife has had a fatal accident. This story offers yet another great role for Steven Weber, as it allows him to explore Archer's grief and anger while he tries to hold everything together. Meanwhile, in A Beast Like This, Pascal again loses control of his emotions while at the scene of an accident that leaves a young girl injured, going off on the driver who he believes caused the accident for being reckless. This is the last episode before Chief Bowden returns to Chicago Fire, suggesting that Pascal's continued difficulties after his wife's death may contribute to Bowden's need to visit Firehouse 51. Pascal and Archer have similar storylines in their respective shows. Archer's begins when he gets a call from Sean Luigi Sato, who tells him that Archer's ex-wife passed away after tripping while drunk and hitting her head on a counter. When his initial plans to go to Florida to support Sean are derailed because he's needed in the hospital, he throws himself into his work. However, Archer continually explodes at patients whose behavior reminds him of his own when Sean was younger. Archer's grief seems to be mostly about the things he wished he'd done differently while his ex-wife was alive, especially when they were together and Sean was little. Conversely, Pascal's grief over Monica's death in Chicago Fire is fresh in his mind. Thus, when he goes to a call involving a car accident, it triggers his anger, and he lashes out at the driver, who caused a little girl to become seriously injured. Archer's grief story should have been far more powerful than it was, but it wasn't set up properly. Instead, it was written as a one-off incident that came out of the blue. The writers likely wanted it that way to illustrate how the sudden, unexpected nature of this death impacts Archer. However, the more careful way Pascal's grief story has been handled in Chicago Fire underscores how little sense Archer's story makes. Chicago Fire used Pascal's reaction to the accident as only one part of an ongoing story. Later, he is seen packing Monica's things while continuing to grieve. Earlier at Gaffney, however, Archer's grief is part of a standalone story about his emotional difficulties while trying to work soon after getting the news. Had Archer been actively healing his relationship with his ex-wife throughout Chicago Med Season 10, his grief would have hit as hard as Pascal's grief over Monica does, but as it is, it feels like a plot point rather than a full story. Chicago Fire Season 13 wasted no time addressing the emotional aftermath of Dr. Dean Archer's dramatic meltdown in Chicago Med, yet the resolution fell surprisingly flat. While Chicago fans are used to crossovers that pack an emotional punch, Archer's storyline felt like it was missing something crucial: depth. The franchise has successfully delivered gut-wrenching moments across its shows, from life-threatening fires to harrowing medical emergencies and intense police chases. However, when it came to Archer's descent into turmoil, the emotional weight simply didn't land as it should have. One of the biggest issues was how quickly Chicago Fire brushed over the entire ordeal. When Archer's breakdown played out on Chicago Med, it was a significant moment that showcased his internal struggles. The weight of his past, combined with his deteriorating health and reluctance to accept help, culminated in an explosive moment that left viewers shaken. Naturally, fans expected that Chicago Fire, which often explores the emotional repercussions of traumatic events, would provide a meaningful follow-up. Instead, the show moved past it in a way that felt abrupt and unsatisfying. Part of the reason why Archer's breakdown felt emotionally empty on Chicago Fire is the lack of personal connection between him and the Firehouse 51 crew. Unlike characters such as Dr. Will Halstead, who had deep ties to both Med and Fire, thanks to his brother Jay Halstead from Chicago PD, Archer exists largely in his own bubble. The show briefly acknowledged his struggles, but without a significant personal tie to the Firehouse, it lacked the resonance necessary to make his storyline truly impactful. Additionally, the pacing of the resolution was an issue. Chicago Fire is known for its action-packed storytelling, but it also takes time to develop emotional arcs when necessary. When it has explored mental health struggles in the past, such as Severid's grief over losing his father or Casey's struggle with PTSD, the show has given these storylines room to breathe. Archer's storyline, in contrast, was rushed. The show barely scratched the surface of his struggles before pivoting back to its usual firefighting drama. While this made sense in terms of keeping the show's momentum, it robbed viewers of a deeper, more cathartic resolution. Another problem was how the show framed Archer's struggles as an isolated incident rather than an ongoing battle. In Chicago Med, his breakdown was built up over time, with his worsening kidney disease, his strained relationship with his colleagues, and his fears of becoming a burden all contributing to his emotional collapse. Chicago Fire, however, treated it as a moment of temporary distress, rather than a symptom of a larger problem. This minimized the emotional impact and made his recovery feel too clean-cut. Realistically, someone dealing with the level of stress and medical issues Archer faces wouldn't simply bounce back after a quick pep talk. The lack of realism made it difficult for the audience to truly invest in his journey. Furthermore, the show's decision to shift focus so quickly felt like a missed opportunity. Chicago Fire thrives on its strong character dynamics, and incorporating Archer's struggles into a longer arc could have led to meaningful interactions with the Firehouse crew. For example, having a character like Chief Bowden, who is known for his wisdom and mentorship, offer Archer guidance could have added an emotional layer to the storyline. Similarly, exploring how other characters, particularly those with medical backgrounds like Sylvie Brett, reacted to his situation could have deepened the emotional resonance. Instead, the show opted for a quick resolution that ultimately felt hollow. Another aspect that contributed to the emotional emptiness was the lack of vulnerability shown by Archer himself. While he has always been a guarded character, his breakdown on Chicago Med hinted at a deeper emotional turmoil. Yet when Chicago Fire addressed it, he seemed almost unaffected, as if his struggles had already been neatly compartmentalized. This robbed viewers of the opportunity to see genuine growth or introspection. Instead of allowing him to process his emotions in a meaningful way, the show simply moved on, leaving his character arc feeling incomplete. Moreover, the lack of a significant emotional resolution between Archer and Dr. Hannah Asher, who has been one of the few people genuinely concerned about him, made the storyline feel even more lacking. While Chicago Fire isn't primarily a medical drama, it could have benefited from a brief but meaningful scene where Archer and Asher addressed the fallout of his breakdown. Their relationship has been one of the more compelling aspects of his character's development, and ignoring it in favor of a quick fix felt like a missed opportunity. It's also worth noting that while Chicago Fire has handled emotional arcs well in the past, this particular storyline suffered from being wedged between other high-stakes drama. The show has a lot of moving parts: fire rescues, character romances, and ongoing conflicts within the firehouse, which meant that Archer's struggles didn't get the screen time they deserved. As a result, his storyline felt more like a footnote than a significant character moment. Ultimately, Chicago Fire Season 13 had the chance to expand on Archer's breakdown in a meaningful way, but instead treated it as a minor subplot. By failing to give his emotional struggles the weight they deserved, the show missed an opportunity to create a powerful and resonant storyline. While it's possible that future episodes may revisit his struggles in more depth, the initial handling of his meltdown felt rushed and emotionally empty. For a show that has delivered so many powerful character-driven moments in the past, this particular storyline felt disappointingly flat.